recently moved halfway across the country to Dallas. I've always loved history, so the past week I've been reading about and visiting Dealey Plaza and the JFK assassination. It's an endless rabbit hole. I've read hundreds of pages of testimony from the Warren Commission, Clay Shaw trial, and declassified CIA documents. To be honest, I don't believe there was any conspiracy. All the physical and direct evidence points toward Oswald acting alone, but I admit there is an awful lot of circumstantial and indirect evidence which seems to imply there was a conspiracy. It makes for a fascinating read. Those who do believe in a conspiracy have hundreds of different explanations as to what they think really happened. It was the KGB, Castro, the anti-Castro Cuban refugees, the mafia, political extremists on either side, the FBI, the CIA, or even combinations of these groups. But one of the main conspiracy theories regarding the assassination, on which Orleans Parish District Attorney Jim Garrison presented his case against Clay Shaw on, is that the assassination was carried out on behalf of powerful political figures and the military-industrial complex. The US president, just before Kennedy, was Eisenhower. Eisenhower famously warned in his farewell address against the military-industrial complex.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
One repeated claim of those who believe in a conspiracy in regards to JFK is his hesitation to fully commit America to the fight in Vietnam. The theory being that defense industrial leaders, who stood to gain massive profits through a major war in Vietnam, decided to remove Kennedy and to have his successor, President Johnson, escalate US involvement in Vietnam. And Johnson actually did do this, signing National Security Action Memorandum 273 just one day after Kennedy's funeral, which began the Vietnam War in earnest. But first, our sponsor, Mira Safety. If you are worried at all about world events, war breaking out, terrorist attacks, even natural disasters like wildfires, biological threats either man-made or from nature, or even industrial accidents, don't be caught off guard. Mira Safety has the highest quality gas masks and suits to protect yourself, your family, even children. They are used by military, law enforcement, and industry professionals across the world. It's not something you would normally think of, and something you'd probably rather not think about, but this can make all the difference in the world. Mira Safety provides protection against it all: chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. Use coupon code CABAL10, no space, for 10% off your first order. Check them out at mirasafety.com. With Eisenhower's warning, and what some claim to be a major course change from Kennedy to Johnson in regards to Vietnam, it begs the question, just how powerful is this military-industrial complex? And first, what is it even? The military-industrial complex is just how it sounds, the relationship between the military and the industry who builds the weapons. Prior to World War II, it was virtually non-existent. In the event of a war, civilian factories, which normally built plows, or automobiles in peacetime, could be converted over to produce swords, guns, ammunition, etc. After World War II, everything changed. Weapons became infinitely more complex. No longer could the civilian industry quickly switch over to building weapons of war. Things like missiles, tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels required years upon years of research and development. Sophisticated computer systems have to be designed to operate them and then tested. This means the creation of an entire industry whose sole purpose it is to design and build these weapons, even during peacetime. These companies also need to work directly with the government for design specifications, address the military's needs, and for the money to develop the systems. The concern here is that these companies only make money when there is a need for newer and more sophisticated weaponry. I won't get too much into the politics, but anytime you have a private industry working directly with the government, where massive amounts of money is awarded in contracts, it opens the door for corruption. We have seen this many times. One example came in 2003, when the US Air Force was considering options to replace its aging fleet of tanker aircraft. An Air Force official, Darlene Duryoung, inflated the price for the tanker contract in favor of Boeing, and also began sharing confidential information with Boeing on their competitor for the contract, EADS's Airbus A330 MRTT. Unsurprisingly, Boeing won the contract, and DeYoung quit the Air Force and went to work with Boeing, receiving a salary of $250,000, plus a large signing bonus. After an investigation, she pleaded guilty and sentenced to prison. Boeing CFO, Philip Sears, who hired DeYoung and was also involved in the tanker controversy, was forced to resign and sentenced to prison as well. The CEO of Boeing was also forced to resign, and Boeing was fined over $500 million for their part in the corruption. It is not at all uncommon for US government workers in the Pentagon, generals, and officials in charge of acquisition projects to go on to work for defense companies after. Companies like Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman. These four companies combined sell more than $125 billion worth of arms every single year, making up 30% of all the arms sales in the entire world annually. Lockheed Martin is the largest, with over 100,000 employees, and an operating income, not revenue, but income of over $7 billion a year. They make everything from the F-35 stealth fighter, the new LRASM anti-ship missile, THAAD, the Aegis combat system, cyber warfare systems, along with many, many more. There is massive money to be made. The US defense budget for 2020 is $718 billion, over half of which, more than $360 billion, will go to defense contractors, which is more than every other US government agency combined. Food, other goods and services for service members, uniforms, construction, research and development, weapons, vehicles, and much more. With that much money at stake, these companies fight tooth and nail for contracts. In 2018, the defense industry spent over $120 million lobbying the US government in attempts to influence decision-making. To put that in perspective, about half as much as the pharmaceutical industry, and slightly less than the oil and gas industry. The money is split pretty evenly between Democrat and Republican politicians and candidates, with 56% going toward Republicans. The concern with this is obvious. These companies are trying to convince the government to give them money. In defense of the defense industry, lobbying is not illegal, and it makes sense. They are companies. All companies are in the business of making money. The real problem is the backdoor, illegal dealings and bribes, like the one I previously mentioned. The untold millions given to politicians to vote in favor of, or even to manipulate foreign policy in favor of war. We will likely never know just how far it really reaches. Is it just a few bad actors in these companies and in the government? Or is it really the entire military-industrial complex? There are countless conspiracy theories on this, from companies like Halliburton and President Bush, who started the war in Iraq, to the JFK assassination, with a claimed conspiracy to ramp up the war in Vietnam, even today with Trump and Iran. The military-industrial complex does benefit civilian life as well. Nearly all modern technology can be traced back to military projects. Space travel from World War II ballistic missile research. The GPS we use to navigate came directly from a US military project to develop better methods of guidance and navigation. The internet also came from a US military project to develop digital forms of communications between computers, and many, many more. Other nations, like China and Russia, have a different system, one where the defense industry is by and large owned by the government. This way, there is no competing for contracts and lobbying. When the Russian government wants to build a new air defense system, they assign the state-owned Almaz-Antey to construct it. However, this system is not without its own problems. But in a capitalist country like the US, the military-industrial complex seems unavoidable, something Eisenhower was fully aware of. While he knew full well that it was necessary, the military-industrial complex is something to watch and be on alert for.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.